मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है डॉक्टर यासीन साहब से। डॉक्टर साहब, पाकिस्तान को ज़्यादातर या तो वो रिकवरी ऑन द ब्रिंक ऑफ रिकवरी होता है या खुदा न खास्ता ऑन द डिफ़ॉल्ट के चक्कर में होता है। तो ये साइकिल्स जो हैं ये रिपीट होते रहते हैं। अभी आजकल हम टेक ऑफ जो भी लफ्ज़ यूज़ कर लें अपनी इकॉनमी को डिस्क्राइब करने के लिए कि इस वक्त इस गवर्नमेंट के पास फिस्कल स्पेस भी है, एक्सचेंज रेट भी अच्छा चल रहा है, इंटरेस्ट रेट भी लोअर हैं। ये जो साइकिल्स हैं हमारे जो बूम और बस्ट के, इनको कैसे स्टेबलाइज किया जा सकता है अगर इसको हमें थोड़ा इन साइकिल्स को, बूम और बस्ट को थोड़ा सा लेवल करना हो तो?
ये ले लो।
Can you hear me? Yes. Your initial question, was it relating to just cycles or to the IMF program?
So at times वो जो साइकिल, छोटा वाला साइकिल होता है ऑन द पाथ टू रिकवरी, और हम ग्रोथ के स्टेज में चले गए और पाकिस्तान की इकॉनमी अब टेक ऑफ करने वाली है। फिर उसके बाद एक साइकिल जल्दी आ जाता है कि नहीं, फिर हमारी एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़ी, इंपोर्ट लेड एक्सपोर्ट थी, जब इंपोर्ट ज़्यादा किया तो फिर फॉरेन एक्सचेंज हेवाय हो गया और फिर दोबारा से ग्रोथ रिटार्डेड हो गई। तो जो साइकिल्स हैं हमारी ये रिकवरी के या डिफ़ॉल्ट की तरफ जाने के, ये इनके सिक्लिकल होने को कैसे एज अ सेंट्रल बैंकर या एज अ बैंकर या एज एन इकोनॉमिस्ट आप क्या हम लोग करें कि ये साइकिल्स थोड़े से इनकी जो सिविरिटी है वो कम हो जाए, ऊपर की तो रहे, नीचे वाली कम हो जाए?
Okay, good question. I think Dr. Ishrat has touched on some key points. I'm going to speak in English. It's a little easier. I hope you don't mind. My Urdu is not as fluent as Dr. Ishrat. Dr. Ishrat touched on a couple of key points, which I think relate to your question also. The key factors relating to any economy in the case of Pakistan are three things: revenues, balance of payments, and private sector credit. You fix the first one, the others over time will fall into place. Now, in terms of these short and long-term cycles, that is more attributed to a couple of reasons. And I want to cite you a couple of examples which other countries don't have these cycles. Example like China. We always talk about China. China in the last 30, 40 years has eliminated 750 million people out of poverty, which took some nations 200 years to achieve. Dr. Ishrat mentioned about poverty alleviation. Then in the last 20 years, since 2000, take for example, the United States and China had 0 high-speed rails. As of last year, China has over 44,000 high-speed rail speed trains. The United States still has 0. Over the last 20 years, in the Fortune 500 companies, the United States had 196 as of and China had 11 as of year 2000. As of end of last year, China had 142 and the United States had 136. Okay? Now there's a big turnaround. I could cite other examples, but the point I'm trying to make is the long-term sustainability of these policies that China implemented that led to this progressive growth. Unfortunately, in our country, and I worked 7 years as a deputy governor and governor over 4 different governments, and I saw that each time, every year or every few years, the policies change with respect to the government changes. So we have strategic interests here in this country, but the political stability is not there. And the political stability has to be congruent to the policies enacted by the fiscal side as well as the state bank's monetary policy. Now, the I call it fiscal mismanagement, is where the problem has been. Our tax to GDP ratio has been about 9%. Other countries would be upper teens, and the United States is about 25%. Europe is higher. So these kind of policies need to be sustained. When FDI comes here, they look at one thing: certainty versus uncertainty. We have uncertainty in our country. Look at the stock market. It's been very volatile based on these cycles. Now, if you look at emerging market economies like ours, the emerging market economies have FDI, and you would know better on this as far as Pakistan's numbers, is generally about 11%. The United States is about 17, 18%. And ours is a bit lower. I'm sure you would have a better idea on that. But that gives you an indicator of where uncertainty will dictate how we attract FDI, which is essential for our investment and our long-term growth. So what I'm pointing out is China as an example, long-term sustainability. Pakistan has short-term policies that repeatedly get changed. And when they get changed, you can't have policies that are supposed to be long-term in sustainability. Like Dr. Saab said, monetary policy takes a little time to implement. And that's the reason why we've got these cycles which must be matching the fiscal management of our government.
तो डॉक्टर साहब इससे रिलेटेड फिर नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन ये होता है कि पाकिस्तान ने बहुत सारे IMF प्रोग्राम्स रिकरिंग बेसिस पे आए देता रहा लेकिन आज भी वो जो रिफॉर्म्स हैं वो अभी भी सबसे पहले एजेंडे में होता है उनको तो क्या हम रिफॉर्म्स मुश्किल पार्ट होता है हमसे होते नहीं हैं हम करते नहीं हैं कि अभी भी स्ट्रक्चरल रिफॉर्म्स के चक्कर में हमें सबसे पहला जो सवाल होता है कि जो हमें पैसे मिलते हैं कि उसमें आप रिफॉर्म्स कितने करेंगे क्या करेंगे तो इतने सारे IMF प्रोग्राम्स के बावजूद क्या हम रिफॉर्म्स को मानने को तैयार नहीं हैं कि वो हमारी इकॉनमी के लिए अच्छे नहीं हैं?
That's a good question and not an easy one, but I'll share with you one piece of information. I was contacted by the IMF about 2.5 years back. And they wanted to interview me. I said, I agreed. So I felt that maybe others were being interviewed, but they told me that I was the only one that was being interviewed because Washington wanted that interview. And the reason was that I signed in August, negotiated with the IMF, the monetary side and the banking side, the 6.7 billion IMF facility in August of 2013. And they said that you signed something that was the only agreement in the history of Pakistan that was completed satisfactorily without suspension. Which is a fact. Mr. Dar says that too, but he was doing the fiscal side. Now, why was that the case? There are a couple of reasons, not just one reason where there was one party that was smarter than the other. No, it's because we negotiated a back-end program, not a front-loaded program. So there's a gap. It's like project finance. You don't negotiate a front-loaded program and then have to repay every 6 months thereafter because you haven't put in the reforms and implemented the guarantees, etc., for our project finance to generate that revenue to repay after a grace period of three years or so. That was one reason. The other is, of course, in that period of time, just before that, in that 2013, we had a current account deficit of about 1.5% to 2%, which was not serious, but it was a serious problem at that time because we were really short of reserves. And we managed to bring in from China about $3 billion. That was unexpected. And that was from the currency swap agreement with China, the ICBC bank that came in, they supported us, as well as the People's Bank of China. Total about 2.5 to 3 billion. And that has sustained us for that period and helped us negotiate our terms on our terms with the IMF, the conditions that were necessary in that agreement. As a result, in September 30th, 2013 and December 31st, we met our NIR targets without any problem. So we had terms that were within our own reach. That's what we negotiated. Now, coming back to another item which has to do with, again, back-to-back reforms that go forward, and why is it that these terms and conditions do not fulfill our objectives? Because one, as I mentioned earlier, we have governments that change frequently. And secondly, the IMF agreement is really based on instilling a sense of discipline in any country's policies. That discipline is not there at times. And we must adopt those long-term disciplines from a fiscal management point of view to ensure that the monetary policy then works together in collaboration with the two. Sometimes the fiscal policy, take for example, every year we announce a PSDP budget of a very substantial amount. By January, the third quarter, we cut that PSDP budget entirely. Why? Because we're not meeting our fiscal revenue targets and our expenditures. And that hurts us because the backbone of any economy is to invest in infrastructure. That spills over into SME and other factors that stimulate growth, of course, and employment and so forth. So these are areas that we have to coordinate and put together in a disciplined fashion to support and maintain those IMF programs and not go back to them each time. Just very quick comment on
Please.
infrastructure and FDI that Dr. Isham. But first, before I do that, I want to make a slight correction that the IMF program that I mentioned was the only one that's completely satisfactory. There were one or two others, 201 and 204, just to correct that. So there are only a few of them that have been correctly completed satisfactorily. That's just aside, a correction on my comment. On the FDI and infrastructure, these are critical points. We've all mentioned what the problems are. We know what the problems are in terms of the various sectors, how it's a consumer-driven economy, et cetera, how we can capitalize on that. But we don't have those policies which have been articulated to implement them. Implementation is the key. And without that, it's not going to happen. And I'm going to cite an example again. I keep going back to a success story like China. China has about 235 million people that will be, adult population that will be retiring by 2030. They're already planning for the next 5-6 years and implementing programs to develop a capital market, fixed income market, to ensure that they generate the returns that's commensurate with inflation. That's what they'll need. Additionally, technology was mentioned. It's the hallmark of future success. We are developing that technology also with the mobile payments that everybody gets access to banking services, which prior to 2008, 85% of our adult population did not have any bank accounts. Today, 64% have them, and 14% have women are also involved in bank accounts. But these digital payments are bringing in the unbanked sector into the financial sector. This needs to be elevated even more. Why? Because that is the growth of the economy. You're not going to have employment, you're not going to have growth in the economy until you have that. The Chinese developed surpluses in their current account and the trade surpluses, which is why they generated $3 to $4 trillion in reserves. Okay? That was the hallmark of success because of the manufacturing country that fed the whole world at that time, even the United States. Now they're going to the services sector. The technology area is going to be booming again over there. You take a look at that DeepSeek, how it came out with a product, a low-cost product delivery that decimated trillions of dollars in the stock market in the United States with the Magnificent Seven stocks. One can go on, but the policies that I'm citing are successful in China. Take a look at Shenzhen. In 1996, they passed a resolution to make that village into an export zone, export processing zone. It is now one of the largest exporters in the world as a port. Why? Because they relegated the authority of not federal responsibility, the local to provincial, county, municipal levels. That's where the authority rested, and it became very successful.
Thank you very much.